The year is 1932. Amidst the terse political atmosphere brewing before the Second World War, Polish cryptanalyst Marian Rejawski and his team are meticulously piecing together their understanding of Germany's greatest encryption device, the Enigma machine. Finally, they discover an answer to the encryptions through smuggled French intel, and the idea for the counteracting bomber machine is born in 1938. But the war is only beginning, and Germany refuses to be so easily overcome before they've even started. After internal changes to the Enigma's physical machinery, the bomber is rendered useless. Little does Rejawski know that his and the world's salvation lies in the hands of a remarkable man born more than 2,000 kilometers away and 20 years before. Starting with an isolated childhood, culminating his life as one of the most important people of the 20th century, and dying too soon under tragic circumstances, Alan Turing is a man never to be forgotten. Hi, my name is Mia, and welcome to the pilot episode of Rainbow Relics, the series that introduces you to the incredible queer people that shaped our world's history. This week is all about British cryptanalyst and mathematician Alan Turing. Links to sources and further reading are listed in the description below. Turing was born in Maida Vale in London on the 23rd of June in 1912 to parents Ethel and Julius Turing as their second son. When he was 13, he was placed into Sherborne School in Dorset at his father's insistence, where he found his love of mathematics and natural science. He displayed high levels of intelligence from a young age, which did not go unnoticed by his teachers, though this was not always respected in the way he deserved. To them, his experiments and analytical worldview was often mistaken for misbehavior. Because of his intelligence, he remained rather isolated, like the nerdy kid, only finding one friend in Christopher Morcom. Tragically, Morcom died in his house in 1930 after battling bovine tuberculosis. It is said that this fueled Turing's desire to study math, wondering if Morcom's soul could have survived without his body. In an essay he wrote, he delved further into this theory using ideas rooted in quantum mechanics. After finishing his initial schooling at Sherborne, Turing enrolled to King's College in 1931 to study mathematics further. Once he graduated in 1934, he was invited back as a fellow due to his work proving the central limit theorem in his paper on computable numbers with an application to the Einstein problem. The Einstein problem, or decision problem, and I really hope that I pronounced that right because I'm not German, set out to try and find a standard formula to measure if a mathematical equation could be proven or not. Also, I'm not a mathematician, so a lot of the paper is jargon to me, but it is available for you to read for yourself if that's something you're interested in. While working through this decision problem paper, he came up with a thought experiment that became known as the Universal Turing Machine. The machine, the thought experiment, would read tapes with data written on them and be able to read and write data and output the results. He devised that all maths that a human brain can undertake, a computer brain could do, and vice versa. And since the Universal Turing Machine could not prove any mathematical equation until after it was done, no human could make a formula for it. Upon reading this and noticing its similarities in his own work, but using a far more streamlined method, famous mathematician Alonzo Church voted for Turing's paper to be published. Church was also Turing's mathematics professor when he studied for his PhD in mathematical logic at Princeton. After starting in 1936, he finished his studies 2 years later in 1938. That same year, he moved back to England and took up a part-time position with the Government Code and Cyber School, granting him access to Bletchley Park and their code-breaking operations in 1939. The official start of the Second World War. Here, finally, Turing was met with the work Marian Rejawski had been undertaking for 7 years. Using the layouts of the bomber machine, Turing and the cryptanalyst team he led created the bomb machine that worked in a related but distinctively different way. In 1940, Germany altered the hardware of the Enigma and the Polish bomber was rendered entirely useless. Thankfully, Turing did not think about decoding in terms of hardware, but in line with the Enigma's software. Turing correctly theorized that the Enigma used keys to encode messages in a different way each time, with 150 million separate possible combinations, all made with a plugboard of 10 pairs of 26 letters. Instead of trying to predict what combination would be used, Turing's bomb machine looked for what was dubbed as cribs. These cribs were frequent buzzwords transmitted through the enigma. When one was found, the encryption used for it was applied to the rest of the message, and the whole transmission was decoded and easy to read for the British military. By 1942, Turing's Bletchley Park cryptanalyst team was responsible for decoding 2 messages every minute for 24 hours every day. For his service, Turing was made an Officer of Most Excellent Order of the British Empire for his work after the code-breaking process. In the end, the breaking of the Enigma codes was due to guesswork as much as it was meticulous problem-solving. At the same time as Turing was saving the world, he was also coming to terms with himself. Deemed as shy and awkward by people who knew him, Turing entered into a short engagement with fellow cryptanalyst Joan Clarke in 1941, but they never married. Later that year, the engagement was called off, not to either of their surprise. Apparently, Turing was very open about his homosexuality among his close friends at the time, even though he knew it was a criminal offense and threatened his position working with the government. Some sources say that he was not the type of person to hide anything, even with his shy nature, and he didn't want to have to separate his sexuality from the rest of his person. The fact still remained that social situations were never his aptitude, and this stunted the growth of his theories and studies, as he had a limited group of people to call to his aid. It is said that, although he was excellent at forming tight friendships, he was unable to make any informal professional contacts. After the end of World War II and the defeat of the German forces, Turing was brought to London's National Physical Laboratory to aid in the design of an electronic computer. Turing did not take this invitation lightly, and soon was theorizing the design of the world's first stored program digital computer, or mechanical brain, called the Automatic Computing Engine, or ACE. This design had been in the workings for Turing for some time, having been first shared between him and a colleague named Don Bailey after Bletchley Park. However, the engineers at MPL deemed the design too challenging to attempt an undertaking of, and this culminated in the title of first computer manufactured to be given to the Royal Society Computing Machine Laboratory in June 1948. Seeing there would be more opportunities if he moved on, Turing became the deputy director at the self-same computing machine laboratory that cost his team their prestige. Even though Turing's computer design was never built, his concept was used as a model for machines worldwide for several years into the future. Notably, the designs of the electric DEUCE and the first personal computer, the Bendix G15. Without the universal Turing machine thought experiment Turing came up with while in King's College, the history of computers would have unfolded very differently. His deputy directorship, which was technically the same as the directorship as there was nobody to outrank him, allowed Turing to further his advancements in computer science and development. He designed the programming system as well as the world's first programming manual to be used in the first marketed computer, the Ferranti Mark I from 1951, all using technology and knowledge he acquired during his time at Bletchley Park. At around the same time this computer was being engineered, Turing turned his sights to the budding field of artificial intelligence. He became one of the first people to articulate the idea of the human brain as being fundamentally similar to that of a computer. In 1950, he developed the Turing Test as a guide for artificial intelligence testing. In his paper, Computing Machinery and Intelligence, he stated that the question posed before, that of, can machines think, was poorly defined. He thought it better to think of intelligence in terms of performance. If a computer could get a human questioner to believe that it was human, who was to say it was not intelligent? Apart from performative intelligence, this also placed linguistic intelligence as separate from embodiment, and could be expressed completely through verbal or written language. Nervous about his findings, the paper was only ever published in the BBC's philosophical publication of Mind. Due to this, and probably more to his new computer design, Turing was elected a Fellow of the Royal Society of London. Sadly, his final years were steeped in mystery and, in part, tragedy, and poorly fitting for his brilliant life. In 1952, following a break-in of his apartment by his partner Arnold Murray's brother, or friend, depending on the source, and upon questioning by the police, Turing was charged with gross indecency when the nature of his and Murray's relationship was brought to light. Can you imagine? You go to the police saying that your house has been broken in, and then you're the one in handcuffs? It's just... I don't know. Yeah. When given the option between incarceration and chemical castration, Turing chose the latter. This meant, in essence, that he was given scheduled estrogen injections over a span of 12 months. This treatment left Turing impotent for the rest of his life, and since at the time queer people were considered a threat to government security as they were more susceptible to blackmail, Turing had his GCHQ clearance revoked, and he was barred from any other government-funded position. This didn't deter him from working, and he took his punishment with his head held high, going so far as to publish yet another paper. In 1952, he came out with Chemical Basis of Morphogenesis, which went about describing how artificial life, the simulation of life within a computer, could be developed by monitoring and observing patterns of living creatures. Basically, he was trying to turn life into math, because what else do you do when the world turns its back on you? Turing lived for little under 2 more years after the paper was published when, 2 weeks before his 42nd birthday, he was found dead in his apartment. The facts surrounding his death are cloudy at best. Some claim him to have committed suicide by cyanide ingestion due to his chemical castration. Some sources say he was found with an apple in his hand, which he had coated in cyanide. Others say he drank 4 ounces of cyanide that the autopsy found in his stomach and ate the apple to dull the taste. Or it could have been an accidental death caused from inhalation of cyanide fumes from the laboratory he had made for himself in his apartment. After all, those that knew him said he never seemed more depressed after the hormone punishment, nor did he ever exhibit suicidal patterns. Still others claim his death as murder, a cover-up by the British government so their secrets about the Enigma decoding or anything else that transpired in Bletchley Park would never be found out. Regardless of the details, the outcome remains the same. The day was June 7th, 1954, and Alan Matheson Turing was dead. His story culminates with a softer epilogue. Posthumously, Turing was given a number of awards at different stages. At the turn of the century, for instance, he made the list of Time's 100 most important people of the 20th century. Not that it came to the surprise of anyone. And in 2004, 50 years after his death, the University of Surrey unveiled a bronze statue in Turing's likeness to mark the occasion. Another statue in his honor was erected in Bletchley Park in 2007, and, on his 86th birthday, Turing received an official English Heritage Blue Plaque at the house he grew up in. The British government finally came face to face with the errors they made, and, on September 10, 2009, they pardoned Turing on the grounds of his homosexuality. He also received a royal pardon by Queen Elizabeth II herself in 2013, and in 2016, Turing's law pardoned all gay and bisexual men who had been criminally charged of homosexuality before the law was introduced, and had that part of their criminal record completely expunged. So, while following his dreams and setting out doing what he loved, Turing was able to make the UK a more inclusive place for all queer men, from even beyond the grave.